Elza reads A Game of Thrones by George Martin. Chapter 52, John. Author, announced Sir Jeremy Ricker, beyond a doubt, and this one was Jaffa Flowers. He turned the corpse over with his foot, and the dead white face stared up at the overcast sky with blue eyes. They were Ben Stark's men, both of them. My uncle's men, John thought numbly. He remembered how he'd pleaded to ride with them. God, I was such a green boy. If he had taken me, it might be me lying here. Jaffa's right wrist ended in the ruin of torn flesh and splintered bone left by ghost jaws. His right hand was floating in a jar of vinegar back in Maester Aemon's tower. His left hand, still at the end of his arm, was as black as his cloak. God have mercy, the old bear muttered. He swung down from his gear and handing his reins to John. The morning was unnaturally warm. Beads of sweat dotted the Lord Commander's broad forehead like dew in a melon. His horse was nervous, rolling her eyes, backing away from the dead men as far as her lead would allow. John led her off a few paces, fighting to keep her from bolting. The horses did not like the feel of this place. For that matter, neither did John. The dogs liked it least of all. Ghost had led the party here. The pack of hounds had been useless. When Bast the kennel master had tried to get them to take the scent from the severed hand, they had gone wild, yowling and barking, fighting to get away. Even now they were snarling and whimpering by turns, pulling at their leashes where Chet cursed them for curs. It is only wood, John told himself, and there are only dead men. He had seen dead men before. Last night he had dreamed the Winterfell dream again. He was wandering the empty castle, searching for his father, descending into the crypts. Only this time the dream had gone further than before. In the dark he'd heard the scrape of stone on stone. When he turned he saw that the vaults were opening one after the other. As the dead kings came stumbling from their cold black graves, John had woken in pitch dark, his heart hammering. Even when Ghost leapt up on the bed to nuzzle at his face, he could not shake his deep sense of terror. He dared not go back to sleep. Instead he had climbed the wall and walked restless until he saw the light of the dawn off to the east. It was only a dream. I'm a brother of the Night's Watch now, not a frightened boy. Sam Mortali huddled beneath the trees, half hidden behind the horses. His round, fat face was the colour of curdled milk. So far he had not lurched off to the woods to retch, but he had not so much as glanced at the dead men either. I can't look, he whispered miserably. You have to look, John told him, keeping his voice low so that the others would not hear. Mr. Aemon sent you to be his eyes, didn't he? What good are eyes if they're shut? Yes, but I'm such a coward, John. John put a hand on Sam's shoulder. We have a dozen rangers with us, and the dogs, even Ghost. No one will hurt you, Sam. Go ahead and look. The first look is the hardest. Sam gave a tremulous nod, working up his courage with a visible effort. Slowly he swiveled his head. His eyes widened, but John held his arm so he could not turn away. Sir Jeremy, the old bear asked gruffly. Ben Stark had 6 men with him when he rode from the wall. Where are the others? Sir Jeremy shook his head. Would that I knew. Plainly Mormont was not pleased with that answer. 2 of our brothers butchered almost within sight of the wall, yet your rangers heard nothing, saw nothing. Is this what the Night's Watch has fallen to? Do we still sweep these woods? Yes, my lord, but do we still mount watches? We do, but this man wears a hunting horn, Mormont pointed at Arthur. Must I suppose that he died without sounding it, or have your rangers all gone deaf as well as blind? Sir Jeremy bristled, his face taut with anger. No horn was blown, my lord, or my rangers would have heard it. I do not have sufficient men to mount as many patrols as I should like, and since Benjen was lost, we have stayed closer to the wall than we were wont to do before, by your own command. The old bear grunted. Yes, well, be that as it may, he made an impatient gesture. Tell me how they died. Squatting beside the dead man he had named Jaffa Flowers, Sir Jeremy grasped his head by the scalp. The hair came out between his fingers, brittle as straw. The knight cursed and shoved at the face with the heel of his hand. A great gash in the side of the corpse's neck opened like a mouth crusted with dried blood. Only a few ropes of pale tendons still attached the head to the neck. This was done with an axe. Muttered Darwin the old forester. Belike the axe that Arthur carried, my lord. John could feel his breakfast churning in his belly, but he pressed his lips together and made himself look at the second body. Arthur had been a big ugly man, and he made a big ugly corpse. No axe was in evidence. John remembered Arthur. He had been the one bellowing the bored song as the rangers rode out. His singing days were done. His flesh was blanched white as milk everywhere but his hands. His hands were black like Java's. Blossoms of hot, cracked blood decorated the mortal wounds that covered him like a rash, breast and groin and throat. Yet his eyes were still open. They stared up at the sky, blue as sapphires. Sir Jeremy stood. The wildlings have access too. Mormont droned on him. So ye believe this is man's raiders' work, this close to the wall? Who else, my lord? John could have told him. He knew they all knew, yet no man of them would say the words. The others only a story. A tale to make children shiver. If they ever lived at all, they are gone 8,000 years. Even the felt foolish. He was a man grown now, a black brother of the Night's Watch, not the boy who'd once sat at old man's feet with Bran and Robb and Ira. Yet Lord Commander Mormont gave a snort. If Ben Stark had come under wildling attack a half-day's ride from Castle Black, he would have returned for more men, chased the killers through all 7 hells, and brought me back their heads. Unless he was slain as well, Sir Jeremy insisted. The words hurt even now. It had been so long it seemed folly to cling to the hope that Ben Stark was still alive, for Jon Snow was nothing if not stubborn. It has been close on half a year since Benjen left us, my lord, Sir Jeremy went on. The forest is vast. The wildlings might have fallen on him anywhere. I'd wager these 2 were the last survivors of this party, on their way back to us, but the enemy caught them before they could reach the safety of the wall. The corpses are still fresh. These men cannot have been dead more than a day. No! Sam Martolli squeaked. John was startled. Sam's nervous, high-pitched voice was the last he would have expected to hear. The fat boy was frightened of the officers, and Sir Jeremy was not known for his patience. I did not ask for your views, boy, Ricker said coldly. Let him speak, sir, John blurted. Mormont's eyes flickered from Sam to John and back again. If the lad has something to say, I'll hear him out. Come closer, boy. We can't see you behind those horses. Sam edged past John and the Garen, sweating confusedly. My lord, it can't be a day, or look at the blood. Yes, Mormont growled impatiently. Blood, what of it? He saw his mouth close at the sight of it, Chet shouted out, and the rangers laughed. Sam mopped at the sweat on his brow. You can see where Ghost John Dowes. You can see where he tore off that man's hand, and yet the stump hasn't bled. Look, he waved a hand. My father, Lord Randall, he made me watch him dress animals sometimes. When, after Sam shook his head from side to side, his chin quivering. Now that he had looked at all the bodies, he could not seem to look away. A fresh kill. The blood would still flow, my lords. Later it will be clotted like a jelly, thick, and he looked as though he was going to be sick. This man, look at the wrist. It's all crusty, dry like. John saw at once what Sam meant. He could see the torn veins in the dead man's wrist, iron worms in the pale flesh. His blood was a black dust. Yet Jamie Ricker was unconvinced. If they'd been dead much longer than a day, they'd be right by now, boy. They don't even smell. Darwin, the gnarled old forester who liked to boast that she could smell snow coming on, stood closer to the corpse and took a whiff. Well, there are no pansy flowers, but my lord has the truth of it. There's no corpse stink. They aren't rotting, Sam pointed, his fat finger shaking only a little. Look, there's no maggots or worms or anything. They've been lying here in the woods, but they haven't been chewed or eaten by animals, only ghosts. Otherwise, they're untouched, John said softly. And ghosts is different. The dogs and the horses won't go near them. The rangers exchanged glances. They could see it was true, every man of them. Mormont frowned, glancing from the corpse to the dogs. Chet, bring the hounds closer. Chet tried, cursing, yanking on the leashes, giving one animal a lick of his boot. Most of the dogs just whimpered and planted their feet. He tried dragging one. The bitch resisted, growling and squirming as if to escape her collar. Finally she lunged at him. Ted dropped her leash and stumbled backward. The dog leapt over him and bounded off into the trees. This is all wrong, Santali said earnestly. There's bloodstains on their clothes and their flesh, dry and hard, but there's none on the ground or anywhere. With those Sam made himself swallow, took a deep breath. With those wounds, terrible wounds, there should be blood all over, shouldn't there? Diamond sucked at his wooden teeth. Might be they didn't die here. Might be someone brought them and left them for us. A warning is like. That Forrester peered down suspiciously. It might be I'm a fool, but I don't know that Arthur never had no blue eyes before. So Jeremy looked startled. Neither did Flowers, he blighted, turning to stare at the dead man. A silence fell over the wood. For a moment all they heard was Sam's heavy breathing and the wet sound of Darwin sucking on his teeth. John squatted beside Ghost. "Burn them," someone whispered, one of the rangers. John could not have said who. "Yes, burn them," a second voice urged. The old bear gave a stubborn shake of his head. "Not yet. I want Maester Aemon to have a look at them. We'll bring them back to the wall." Some commands are more easily given than obeyed. They wrapped the dead man in cloaks, but when Hawk and Ivan tried to tie one onto a horse, the animal went mad, screaming and rearing, lashing out with its hoofers, even biting at Kata when he ran to help. The rangers had no better luck with the other Garons. Not even the most placid wanted any part of these burdens. In the end they were forced to hack off branches and fashion crude slings to carry the corpses back on foot. It was well past midday by the time they started back. "I will have these woods searched," Mormont commanded Sir Jeremy as they set out. "Every tree, every rock, every bush, and every foot of muddy ground within 10 leagues of here. Use all the men you have, and if you do not have enough, borrow hunters and foresters from the stewards. If Ben and the others are out here, dead or alive, I will have them found, and if there is anyone else in these woods, I will know of it. You are to track them and take them, alive if possible. Is that understood?" "It is, my lords," Jeremy said. "It will be done." After that, Mormont rode in silence, brooding. John followed close behind him. As the Lord Commander's steward, there was his place. The day was grey, damp, overcast, the sort of day that made you wish for rain. No wind stirred the wood. The air hung humid and heavy, and John's clothes clung to his skin. It was warm, too warm. The wall was weeping copiously. He had been weeping for days, and sometimes John even imagined was shrinking. The old man called this weather spirit summer, and said it meant the season was giving up its ghost at last. After this, the cold would come, they warned, and a long summer always meant a long winter. This summer had lasted 10 years. John had been a babe in arms when it began. Ghost ran with them for a time and then vanished among the trees. Without the direwolf, John felt almost naked. He found himself glancing at every shadow with unease. Unbidden, he thought back on the tales that old Nan used to tell them when he was a boy of Winterfell. He could almost hear her voice again, and the click, click, click of her needles. "In that darkness the others came riding," she used to say, dropping her voice lower and lower. "Cold and dead they were. They hated iron, fire, and the touch of the sun, and every living creature with hot blood in its veins. Holdfasts and cities and kingdoms of men all fell before them as they moved south on pale-dead horses, leading hosts of the slain. They fed their dead servants on the flesh of human children." When he caught his first glimpse of the wall looming above the tops of an ancient gnarled oak, John was vastly relieved. Mormont reined up suddenly and turned in his saddle. "Tarly!" he barked. "Come here!" John saw the start of fright on Sam's face as he lumbered up on his mare. Doubtless he thought he was in trouble. "You fell, but you're not stupid, boy," the old bear said gruffly. "You did well back there, and you, Snow." Sam blushed a vivid crimson and tripped over his own tongue as he tried to stammer out a courtesy. John had to smile. When they emerged from under the trees, Mormont spurred his tough little Garin to a trot. Ghost came streaking out from the woods to meet them, licking his chops, his muzzle red from prey. High above, the man on the wall saw the column approaching. John heard the deep, throaty call of the watchman's great horn, calling out across the miles, a single long blast that shuddered through the trees and echoed off the ice. "Ooh!" The sound faded slowly to silence. One blast meant rangers returning. John thought, I was a ranger for 1 day at least. Whatever may come, they cannot take that away from me. Bowen Marsh was waiting at the first gate as they led the Garin through the icy tunnel. The Lord Steward was red-faced and agitated. "My lord," he blurted at Mormont as he swung open the iron bars, "there's been a bird. You must come at once." "What is it, man?" Mormont said gruffly. Curiously, Marsh glanced at John before he answered. "Maester Aemon has the letter. He's waiting in your solar." "Very well." John seated my horse and tells Sir Jeremy to put the dead man in the storeroom until the maester is ready for them. Mormont stirred away, grumbling. As they led their horses back to the stable, John was uncomfortably aware that people were watching him. Sir Elza Thorne was trailing his boys in the yard, but he broke off to stare at John, a faint half-smile on his lips. One-armed Donald Noy stood in the door of the armory. "The gods be good with you, Snow," he called out. Something's wrong, John thought. Something's very wrong. The dead men were carried to one of the storerooms along the base of the wall, a dark cold cell chiseled from the ice and used to keep meat and grain, sometimes even beer. John saw that Mormont's horse was fat and watered and groomed before he took care of his own. Afterward he sought out his friends. Gran and Toad were on the watch, but he found Pip in the common hall. "What's happened?" he asked. Pip lowered his voice. "The king is dead." John was stunned. Lord Baratheon had looked old and fat when he visited Winterfell, yet he seemed hale enough, and there had been no talk of illness. "How can you know?" "One of the guards overheard Clitus reading the letter to Maester Aemon," Pip leaned close. "John, I'm sorry. He was your father's friend, wasn't he?" "They were his closest brothers once." John wondered if Joffrey would keep his father as the king's hand. It did not seem likely. That might mean Lord Eddard would return to Winterfell, and his sisters as well. He might even be allowed to visit them, with Lord Mormont's permission. It would be good to see Iris grin again and to talk with his father. "I will ask him about my mother," he resolved. "I'm a man now. It is past time he told me. Even if she was a whore. I don't care. I want to know." "I heard Hawk say the dead men were your uncles," Pip said. "Yes," John replied. "2 of the 6 he took with him. They had been dead a long time, only the bodies are queer." "Queer?" Pip was all curiosity. "How queer?" "Sam will tell you." John did not want to talk of it. "I should see if the old bear has need of me." He walked to the Lord Commander's tower alone, with a curious sense of apprehension. The brothers on guard eyed him solemnly as he approached. "The old bear's in the cellar," one of them announced. "He was asking for you." John nodded. He should have come straight from the stables. He climbed the tower steps briskly. He wants wine or fire in his hearth, that's all, he told himself. When he entered the cellar, Mormont's ravens screamed at him. "Corn!" Their bird shrieked. "Corn! Corn! Corn!" "Don't you believe it, I just fed him," the old bear growled. He was seated by the window reading a letter. "Bring me a cup of wine and pour one for yourself." "For myself, my lord?" Mormont lifted his eyes from the letter to stare at John. There was pity in that look. He could taste it. "You heard me." John pulled with exaggerated care, vaguely aware that he was drawing out the act. When the cups were filled, he would have no choice but to face whatever was in the letter. Yet all too soon they were filled. "Sit, boy," Mormont commanded him. "Drink." John remained standing. "It's my father, isn't it?" The old bear tapped the letter with a finger. "Your father and the king," he rumbled. "I won't lie to you, it's grievous news. I never thought to see another king, not at my age, but rather at half my years and strong as a bull." He took a gulp of wine. "They say the king loved to hunt. The things we love destroy us every time, lad. Remember that. My son loved that young wife of his, a vain woman. If not for her, he would never have thought to sell those poachers." John could scarcely follow up what he was saying. "My lord, I don't understand. What's happened to my father?" "I told you to sit," Mormont grumbled. "Sit!" the raven screamed. "And have a drink, damn you. That's a command, Snow." John sat and took a sip of wine. "Lord Eddard has been imprisoned. He is charged with treason. It is said he plotted with Robert's brothers to deny the throne to Prince Joffrey." "No," John said at once. "That couldn't be. My father would never betray the king." "Be that as it may," said Mormont, "it is not for me to say, not for you." "But it's a lie," John insisted. "How could they think his father was the traitor? Had they all gone mad? Lord Eddard Stark would never dishonour himself, would he?" "He fathered a bastard," a small voice whispered inside him. "Where was the honour in that? And your mother, what of her?" He will not even speak her name. "My lord, what will happen to him? Will they kill him?" "As to that I cannot say, lad. I mean to send a letter. I knew some of the king's councillors in my youth. Old Pycelle, Lord Sinister, Barristan. Whatever your father has done or hasn't done, he is a great lord. He must be allowed to take the black and join us here. God knows we need men of Lord Eddard's ability." John knew that other men accused of treason had been allowed to redeem their honour on the wall in days past. Why not Lord Eddard? His father here? That was a strange thought, and strangely uncomfortable. It would be a monstrous injustice to strip him of Winterfell and force him to take the black, and yet if it meant his life. And would Joffrey allow it? He remembered the Prince of Winterfell, the way he'd mocked Robb and Sir Roderick in the yard. John himself had scarcely even noticed bastards were beneath even his contempt. "My lord, will the king listen to you?" The old bear shrugged. "A boy king! I imagine he listened to his mother. A pity the dwarf isn't with him. He's the lad's uncle, and he saw our need when he visited us. It was a bad thing your lady mother taking him captive." "Lady Stark is not my mother," John reminded him sharply. "Cheryl had been a friend to him. If Lord Eddard was killed, she would be as much to blame as the queen." "My lord, what of my sisters, Ira and Sansa? They were with my father. Do you know—" "Pycelle makes no mention of them, but doubtless they be treated gently. I will ask about them when I write." Mormont shook his head. This could not have happened at a worse time. If ever the realm needed a strong king, there are dark days and cold nights ahead. I feel it in my bones. Give John a long, shrewd look. I hope you're not thinking of doing anything stupid, boy. He's my father, John wanted to say, but he knew that Mama would not want to hear it. His throat was dry. He made himself take another sip of wine. Your duty's here now, the Lord Commander reminded him. Your old life ended when you took the black. His bird made a raucous echo. Black? Mormon took no notice. Whatever they do in King's Landing is none of our concern. When John did not answer, the old man finished his wine and said, You're free to go. I'll have no further need of you today. On the morrow you can help me write that letter. John did not remember standing on leaving the sala. The next he knew he was descending the tower steps, thinking, This is my father, my sisters, how can it be none of my concern? Outside one of the guards looked at him and said, Be strong, boy, the gods are cruel. They know, John realized. My father's no traitor, he said hoarsely. Even the words stuck in his throat, as if to choke him. The wind was rising and it seemed colder in the yard than it had when he'd gone in. Spirit summer was drawing to an end. The rest of the afternoon passed as if in a dream. John could not have said where he walked, what he did, who spoke to. Ghost was with him, he knew that much. The silent presence of the direwolf gave him comfort. The girls did not even have that much, she thought. Their wolves might have kept them safe, but Lady is dead and Nymeria is lost. They're all alone. A north wind had begun to blow by the time the sun went down. John continued scuttling against the wall and over the outer battlements as he went to the common hall for the evening meal. Hop had cooked up a venison stew, thick with barley, onions, and carrots. When he spooned an extra portion onto John's plate and gave him the crusty heel of the bread, he knew what it meant. He knows. He looked around the hall, saw heads turn quickly, eyes politely averted. They all know. His friends rallied to him. We asked the Septon to light a candle for your father, Martha told him. It's a lie. We all know it's a lie. Even Gren knows it's a lie. Pip chimed in. Gren nodded and Sam clasped John's hand. You're my brother now, so he's my father too, the fat boy said. If you want to go to the weirwoods and pray to the old gods, I'll go with you. The weirwoods were beyond the wall, yet he knew Sam meant what he said. They are my brothers, he thought, as much as Rob and Bran and Rickon. And then he heard the laughter, sharp and cruel as a whip, and the voice of Sir Alistair Thorne. Not only a bastard, but a traitorous bastard, he was telling the men around him. In the blink of an eye, John had vaulted onto the table, dagger in his hand. Pip made a grab for him, but he wrenched his leg away, and then he was sprinting down the table and kicking the ball up from Sir Alistair's hand. Stew went flying everywhere, spattering the brothers. Thorne recalled. People were shouting, but John Snow did not hear them. He lunged at Sir Alistair's face with the dagger, slashing at those old cold onyx eyes, but Sam threw himself between them before John could get around him. Pip was on his back, clinging like a monkey, and Graham was grabbing his arm while Toad wrenched the knife from his fingers. Later, much later, after they had marched him back to the sleeping cell, Marmont came down to see him, raving on his shoulder. I told you not to do anything stupid, boy, the old bear said. Boy, the bird chorused. Marmont shook his head, disgusted. And to think I had high hopes for you. They took his knife and his sword and told him he was not to leave his cell until the high officers met to decide what was to be done with him. And then they placed a guard outside his door to make certain he obeyed. His friends were not allowed to see him, but the old bear did relent and permit him ghosts, so he was not utterly alone. My father is no traitor, told the direwolf when the rest had gone. Ghost looked at him in silence. John slumped against the wall, hands around his knees, and stared at the candle on the table beside his narrow bed. The flame flickered and swayed, the shadows moved around him, the room seemed to grow darker and colder. I will not sleep tonight, John thought. Yet he must have dozed. When he woke, his legs were stiff and cramped, and the candle had long since burned out. Ghost stood on his hind legs, scrabbling at the door. John was startled to see how tall he'd grown. Ghost, what is it? He called softly. The direwolf turned his head and looked down at him, baring his fangs in a silent sneer. Has he gone mad? John wondered. It's me, Ghost, he murmured, trying not to sound afraid. Yet he was trembling violently. Why had it gone so cold? Ghost backed away from the door. There were deep gouges where he raked the wood. John watched him with mounting disquiet. There's someone out there, isn't there? He whispered. Crouching, the direwolf crept backward, white fur rising on the back of his neck. The God, he thought, they left a man to guard my door. Ghost smells him through the door, that's all it is. Slowly, John pushed himself to his feet. He was shivering uncontrollably, wishing he still had the sword. 3 quick steps brought him to the door. He grabbed the handle and pulled it inward. The creak of the hinges almost made him jump. His guard was sprawled bonelessly across the narrow steps, looking up at him. looking up at him even though he was lying on his stomach. His head had been twisted completely around. It can't be, John told himself. This is the Lord Commander's tower. It's guarded day and night. This couldn't happen. It's a dream. I'm having a nightmare. Ghost slid past him out the door. The wolf started up the steps, stopped, and looked back at John. That was when he heard it. The soft scrape of a boot on stone, the sound of a latch turning. The sounds came from above, from the Lord Commander's chambers. A nightmare this might be, yet it was no dream. The guard's sword was in its sheath. John knelt and worked it free. That of steel in his fist made him bolder. He moved up the steps, Ghost paddling silently before him. Shadows lurked in every turn of the stair. John crept up warily, probing any suspicious darkness with the point of his sword. Suddenly he heard the shriek of Mormont's raven. "Corn!" the bird was screaming. "Corn, corn, 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 corn!" Ghost bounded ahead, and John came scrambling after him. The door to Mormont's cellar was wide open. The direwolf plunged through. John stopped in the doorway, blade in hand, giving his eyes a moment to adjust. Heavy drapes that had been pulled across the windows, and the darkness was black as ink. "Who's there?" he called out, when he saw a shadow in the shadows, sliding toward the inner door that led to Mormont's sleeping cell, a man's shape all in black, cloaked and hooded. But beneath the hood its eyes shone with an icy blue radiance. Ghost slept. Man and wolf went down together with neither scream nor snell, rolling, smashing into a chair, knocking over a table laden with papers. Mormont's raven was flapping overhead, screaming, "Corn! Corn! Corn!" John felt as blind as Maester Aemon. Keeping the wall to his back, he slid toward the window and ripped down the curtain. Moonlight flooded the cellar. He glimpsed black hands buried in white fur, swollen dark fingers tightening around the direwolf's throat. Ghost was twisting and snapping, legs flailing in the air, but he could not break free. John had no time to be afraid. He threw himself forward, shouting, bringing down the longsword with all his weight behind it. Steel sheared through sleeve and skin and bone, yet the sound was wrong somehow. The smell that engulfed him was so queer and cold he almost gagged. He saw arm and hand on the floor, black fingers wriggling in a pool of moonlight. Ghost wrenched free of the other hand and crept away, red tongue lolling from his mouth. The hooded man lifted his pale moon face, and John slashed at it without hesitation. The sword laid the intruder upon the bone, taking off half his nose and opening a gashed cheek, the cheek under those eyes like blue stars burning. John knew that face. Arthur, he thought, reeling back. God, he's dead, I saw him dead. He felt something scramble at his ankle. Blank fingers clawed at his calf. The arm was crawling up his leg, ripping at wool and flesh. Shouting with revulsion, John pried the fingers of his leg with the point of his sword and flipping the thing away. It lay writhing, fingers opening and closing. The corpse lurched forward. There was no blood. One arm, face cut near in half, it seemed to feel nothing. John held the longsword before him. "Stay away," he commanded, his voice gone shrill. "Corn!" screamed the raven. "Corn! Corn!" The severed arm was wriggling out its torn sleeve, a pale snake with a black five-fingered head. Ghost pounced and got it between his teeth. Finger bones crunched. John hacked at the corpse's neck, felt the steel bite deep and hard. That also slipped into him, knocking him off his feet. John's breath went out of him as the fallen table caught him between his shoulder blades. Where was the sword? He lost the damned sword! When he opened his mouth to scream, the wit jammed its black corpse fingers into John's mouth. Gagging, he tried to shove it off, but the dead man was too heavy. Its hand forced itself farther down his throat, icy cold choking him. Its face was against his own, filling the world. Frost covered its eyes, sparkling blue. John raked cold flesh with his nails and kicked at the thing's legs. He tried to bite, tried to punch, tried to breathe. And suddenly, the corpse's weight was gone. Its fingers dripped from the throat. It was all John could do to roll over, retching and shaking. Ghost had it again. He watched as the direwolf buried his teeth in the wit's gust and began to rip and tear. He watched, only half-conscious, for a long moment before he finally remembered to look for his sword, and saw Lord Mormont, naked and groggy from sleep, standing in the door with an oil lamp in hand, gnawed and fingerless, the armed trash on the floor, wriggling toward him. John tried to shout, but his voice was gone. Straggling to his feet, he kicked the arm away and snatched the lamp from the old bear's fingers. The flame flickered and almost died. "Burn!" the raven called. "Burn! Burn! Burn!" Spinning, John saw the drapes that dripped from the window. He flung the lamp into the pile of clothes with both hands. Metal crunched and glass shattered, oil spewed, and the hangings went up in the great whoosh of flame. The heat of it on his face was sweeter than any kiss John had ever known. "Ghost!" he shouted. The direwolf French fiend came to him as the wit struggled to rise, dark snakes spilling from the great wound in its belly. John plunged his hand into the flames, grabbed a fistful of the burning drapes, and he whipped them at the dead man. Let it burn, he prayed as the clothes from under the corpse. Gods, please, please let it burn.